Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a funny card game because Konami sometimes adds support that sometimes directly and indirectly really helps out older cards. If you would have told me that people would be crying for Summoner's Art to be banned at some point in the future when that card was released, I would probably say that you were crazy because I never could have predicted Pendulum Monsters and Cliff Forts and all those crazy cards that Summoner's Art could add to your hand. Similarly, if you would have told me that Thunder Dragon, a level 5 monster that basically does nothing, would one day be not only a very competitive card, but also spawn its own complete archetype, I once again would say that's probably never going to happen. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You really never know what the future is going to look like. Konami can do whatever they want to with whatever support they want to, and in today's video I want to talk about 5 cards that will probably be good in the future. I've made videos in the past about 5 cards that are almost broken and 5 more cards that are almost broken, but these are cards that I'm pretty sure someday, whether or not that's in the next year or 2 years or 5 years, these are cards that'll probably be good in the future. They just need the right format or the right support. At number 5, we have a card that everyone always comments whenever a video like this is posted, and that is Snake Rain. Snake Rain has been out for about 10 years now, and it's never really been played competitively, despite the fact that this thing is ridiculous. At least it would be if there was a good reptile archetype release that could take advantage of this card. This is a normal spell card that says discard 1 card to select 4 reptile type monsters from your deck and send them to the graveyard. It is basically a 4 times Foolish Burial for reptile monsters, and while there hasn't been an archetype release yet that this card is good in, it probably will be good in the future. All it really takes for Snake Rain to be a good / broken card is for there to be a good archetype around reptile monsters that have effects in the graveyard. There were a few gimmicky combos with this thing back when Soul Charge was at 3, but for the most part this card hasn't been competitive, despite the fact that it's basically almost painful choice for reptile monsters. I'd even go as far to say is that if this thing was in any other type besides reptile, even things like Pyro or Rock, this card probably would have been broken, but because it's specifically stuck in reptile type monsters, this card isn't nearly as competitive as it probably would be if it was part of any other type. However, I think eventually, I don't know when, but Konami will release a reptile archetype with graveyard effects, and then this card will be broken for one format and then limited or banned after that. I don't know when Konami is going to do that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Konami does like sort of giving support to cards like this. We see things like Machine Duplication become broken in the future, and this thing, while it doesn't do the same thing as Machine Duplication, they both fall along the same theory of giving a very strong support card to just one type, and it only works in a couple different strategies, but when the card is good, it's absolutely broken. We see Machine Duplication played in Cyber Dragons right now, but also we've seen it played in things like Spirals and Troop Dupe Scoop format that were absolutely crazy with that card, even if it's not always a mainstay in current competition. The next 2 cards are specifically designed to break those big extra linking boards that used to be pretty common about 9 months ago, but we haven't seen a lot in competition recently. What I'm referring to, an extra link, if you don't know what that is when your opponent does a full U shape on their board, locking you out of your own extra monster zone. This can only be done in a few very specific strategies, things mostly abusing Firewall Dragon or Malicious or other crazy combo cards. At the moment, we haven't seen one of those decks really be competitive for a few months now. It's been a while since Dark Warrior was at the top tables, and the very last time that Dark Warrior was at the top tables, oftentimes it wasn't even doing the full extra link combo. It wasn't until like 9 months ago when that combo was last being played, but there are some cards that Konami has recently released in Dark Neostorm that are very specifically designed to counter extra linking if it ever becomes popular again. One of those cards is Nightmare Incarnation Idly, and this card is absolutely ridiculous when against an extra linking board. So this thing says level 9 monsters you control cannot be restored by card effects, which includes itself because it is a level 9 monster. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. That is a hard once per turn effect. It says if the total link rating of the monsters on the field is 8 or more, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. The second effect is if this card is special summoned while your opponent controls more link monsters than you do, you can send all link monsters on the field to the graveyard. Also keep in mind that because this card's second effect doesn't have to be just because it's special summoned with the first effect, it means that you can actually summon this thing right from your deck with Nightmare Mermaid if you wanted to, and then you would trigger its special summon effect. Obviously that doesn't really work if your opponent has a full extra link, but if your opponent just has a very strong board with a lot of link monsters, this thing can still take them all out, and you can even tutor it from your deck with with that Nightmare Mermaid. I think it's pretty safe to say that this thing would have been played during Goki format whenever that deck was being one of the top decks out there, and likely in the future if we ever have another extra linking strategy. Despite the fact that Konami has hit cards like Gumblar and Firewall, it still is possible to have another really heavy link summoning strategy in the future, and in that future this card is very likely to be a mainstay counter to those decks. At number 3 we have yet another card that counters those big extra link boards, and that is the World Chalice Guard Dragon Fusion Monster. This thing is a fusion monster that takes 3 link monsters to summon, and it has some cool effects on the field as well. It can attack all of your opponent's monsters once, you can banish link monsters in the graveyard to do damage to your opponent and destroy cards, but overall the main focus of this card, the reason it's good, the reason it will be good in the future, is that you can use this card in combination with Super Polymerization to get rid of 3 link monsters on your opponent's board. Obviously, in some cases this will actually be better than that other card we just talked about, because this one doesn't require your opponent to have a full extra link board, but it's still pretty good, and Super Polymerization has proved, at least over the past couple of formats, to be a very versatile piece of removal. We see it being used for things like Starving Venom Dragon and the Salamangreat Fusion Monster, and I don't think it's that crazy to think that this card will once in the future be played in an extra deck in combination with Super Poly to break those huge boards. At number 2 we have a card that I actually made an entire video about, and that is Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. If you don't know what this card does, it's a new hand trap released in Dark Neostorm, and it says during either turn except the end phase, you can discard this card to apply this effect for the turn. Each time your opponent special summons an effect monster or monsters during the main phase or battle phase, you gain life points equal to that monster's attack. If you did not gain life points by this effect, your life points are halved during the end phase. Now, for all intents and purposes, that very last line won't go into effect most of the time. You want to be using this card in response to your opponent activating a special summon effect, and in that way this card is exceptionally good against any deck that's trying to FTK you or loop you in sort of some degenerate strategy. We think back to the Danger FTK with Cannon Soldier, and this card would have been a direct counter to those types of decks. When I looked at this card in the past, I was thinking only about the here and now, and right now this card is not very good. You can certainly play other options out there if you're looking for a card to do this, but more importantly, there's no real FTKs in the format right now. I mean, you have people summoning a lot of monster cards, and this thing isn't that good against just normal boards, but if your opponent is specifically trying to FTK you with burn damage, there's basically no other card you would want. More importantly though, this card isn't just good against FTKs, and that's why this card is better than something like Hain Wada, because Hain Wada wasn't really played when Danger FTK was a big deck, but the reason this card has a little bit more sort of validity in terms of competitiveness is that this card isn't only good against FTKs, it can also sometimes be good in a pinch when you're about to go into time. At the moment, the only reason to really consider playing this card is for when you're about to go into time, but that's not really enough of a reason to take up precious side deck slots. However, if there's a format where there's an FTK and also sometimes you're going to go into time, which is basically every format, this card could be a very popular side deck choice to counter those FTK decks with some added versatility if your opponent goes first in game 3 and there's less than 5 minutes on the clock. And lastly, we have Chaos Betrayer, a card probably most of you haven't even heard of. This was a rare release in Dark Neostorm, and now that I'm thinking of it, I guess 4 of these were in Dark Neostorm. Well, I didn't really plan that, they were just cards that I sort of had on my mind. This card is pretty unique though, and I think the reason I'm bringing this card specifically up in this video is that this thing would have been played if it was released about a year earlier. So this thing is a level 6 Fiend monster, and it says if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 1 light and 1 dark monster in your graveyard, except Chaos Betrayer, to special summon this thing in defense position, but banish it when it leaves the field. If this card is special summoned, you can target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and you can only use each effect of Chaos Betrayer once per turn. Now, like I said, the reason I'm bringing this card up is because it actually would have for sure been played in an older deck about a year ago, and that is the Danger Burning Abyss Orbital Hydrolander strategy. That deck would have played this card. I mean, I don't know how many copies it would have played, but it definitely would have played at least 1 copy. You used to see things like Fabled Sulcus, and I'm sure they probably still would have played that, but this thing would have been a nice addition. You can send it with the Fiendish Rhino Warrior. It can take out extra copies like duplicates of cards in your graveyard to help you summon and activate that Orbital Hydrolander effect, and overall it'd just be a very welcome addition to an already pretty powerful strategy that did a ton of YCS competitive success, and I played that deck at YCS Pasadena and it was super fun, and this is definitely a card that I would have used just because it synergizes with so much. It synergizes with the Malicious, you can make Beatrice, and all sorts sorts of effects really would like to have this card. So I think because this card, if it was released a year ago, would have seen play, I'm pretty sure it's very likely that this card will see play sometime in the future. Maybe even it'll see play in a Burning Abyss variant if Malicious ever goes back to 3 or Beatrice ever goes to 2 or 3. This card very well might see play in that type of strategy if that type of strategy is ever competitively viable in the future. I don't think that's that crazy to think about considering we just got Cherubini and that's a very good link monster to play in Burning Abyss. I think in the future this card very well might find itself in a competitive Burning Abyss deck. Anyway though, that is going to wrap up today's video about these 5 Yu-Gi-Oh cards that I think will likely be very good someday. Like I said, Konami has a very weird way of adding support to older cards, but I think these cards in particular are so strong just independently that it's really likely that they'll see play once they get the right support, or at the very least that they can go in the right format in the case of these cards that were very good against extra linking setups. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.